All right, so welcome to part two of our Parenting is Imperfect workshop. This is part two of a series that we did, start part one last week and part two this week. We're taking some time to look at the book, The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting, Raising Children with Courage and Compassion and Connection by Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown. And when we think about parenting, we all know that parenting is a daily job that requires organization, humility, patience, foresight, unselfishness, love, devotion, and so much more. And you probably even had some words that came to mind yourself as you were thinking about parenting is fill in the blank. So, depending on where you are, especially with the ages of your children and what stages they may be in, you may have had some different words that popped up immediately. And so often parents feel like they are simply failing at the job of being a great parent. And our goal here is not to beat anybody up. We're here to say, look, nobody's perfect. Parenting is a journey. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So it is definitely the job that you have for a lifetime, and it will change over time, whether your children are 2 or 4 or 10 or 20 or even 30, 15. That job changes. It looks different at different stages. And so it's truly a marathon. And we adjust and we grow as time goes on with our children. We are growing as people and they are growing as well. And so, even on those days when you feel like I've missed a mark, I've made a mistake, oh, why did I say that? On those days, know that you are still doing a great job. You can rebound from that, you can reset from that. All is not lost. And so, I definitely thank you for joining us to just discuss this book and have some time where you can reflect on your personal journey as a parent. So let's kick it off by talking about what we're going to cover in this session. I'm going to do a really quick review of what we did in session one. Then we're going to talk about our parenting styles so that you can identify which parenting style you are. And, some days you may find that you're in one parenting style, and another day you may be in a different parenting style. Or you may be very consistent. Whichever it is, we just kind of set that foundation for all of us. And we're going to look at some highlights from this audio book. The interesting thing about this book, it is only audible. There is a gift of imperfection that she has. That book is not for parent, it's for anyone. But this very specific one, The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting, is an audiobook only for parents. And then we're going to talk about some of the guideposts and just some considerations from the book and give you opportunity to reflect on your own journey. So here's a few quotes from the book that I thought were pretty interesting, and it aligns perfectly, of course, with this book and where many of us find ourselves. I'm not a parenting expert. In fact, I'm not sure that I even believe in the idea of parenting experts. I'm an engaged, imperfect parent and a passionate researcher. I'm an experienced map keeper and a stumbling traveler. I like that. Like many of you, parenting is by far my boldest and most daring adventure. That's some interesting food for thought. Your most boldest and daring adventure. So here's a quick recap of what we looked at in Guidepost last week when we talked about part one. We talked about cultivating worthiness in your family and the fact that we want to create a home and a space with our families, with our children, where they know that they are worthy and that there's nothing they can do to make them not be worthy, and that we accept them just the way they are. And then we talked about shame versus guilt prone and how we want our child to be more guilt prone and less or not at all shame prone. And we talked about what that looks like. So, like a shame prone child is a child that basically calls themselves names and they identify themselves by their mistakes or shortcomings. So, for example, If they break something, they may say, I'm so stupid because I broke this, or I'm never going to learn this, or I'm the dumbest person in the class. Like all kinds of things like that, that just breaks your heart to hear. But that's what they're thinking and that's what they're feeling. So it's good to know that. So it helps you to know how to approach them and how to help them. And then the guilt prone child is the child is like, oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that, or I'll do better next time. That's the one that's owning and acknowledging whatever the shortcoming is or whatever the mistake is, but they're not saying that's how I identify myself. Like, so that's just a little bit difference there. And then vulnerability. We talked about the importance of being vulnerable with our child and letting them see us work through challenges and letting them see us work through mistakes that we make. And just, being open to how we're living in the world and, how, and it helps them to know, oh, you can make a mistake, but you're not a mistake, as an example. So here's another quote. What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. I love that because as humans, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to forget. We are going to drop things and break things. But just knowing that, don't shame yourself for being human. You're not perfect. We are imperfect. We're doing the best we can any given day. So I just love that reminder. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. Part two, looking at the remainder of the guidepost. Worthiness in families. So I just wanted to revisit that just a little bit as a kind of refresher. And then we're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism and love and belonging and hopefulness. So let's just start with the beginning. What is parenting? Parenting is imperfect. Even if you're having a wonderful day, the next day might not be so wonderful. So, parenting is imperfect. The most powerful and meaningful moments with our children happen in these imperfect moments. Love that reminder. Love that reminder. Oftentimes, we call those teachable moments, and that's vulnerable moments sometimes. But sometimes that's some of the most powerful moments that we have with our children. And then most of us are in our homes trying to do the best we can. There's no instruction guide or rule book for being a parent. And of course, when we think about that, there's hundreds of books on parenting and parenting styles and parenting practices and all of that. And that's all wonderful. But every person is parenting their child or their children. And so those books can have some wonderful advice that you may be able to apply some of those things. But at the end of the day, you are still parenting your child with their unique circumstances and their unique personality and their unique interest. And so we're just trying to do our best every day. And if you have multiple children, oftentimes you'll find yourself having to adjust your parenting based on the child. And it's okay to be okay with that. Every child is different and they need different things. So I really appreciate that reminder. No one is a parenting expert. Most of us feel vulnerable all the time. And then connection over perfection. I love this idea of connection over perfection because this whole talk is talking about that we are not perfect parenting parents. We're never going to be. And it's okay. But there are some gifts in being imperfect. There are some gifts in allowing your child to see you be vulnerable. There are some gifts in helping your child understand the difference between shame and guilt and how to love themselves despite their challenges. There are some gifts, in your everyday powerful, meaningful moments that you have with your child, even if things don't go right or go your way that day. So there's some gifts in that. And so I love this idea that we're talking about connection over perfection. Connection over perfection. So it's encouraging us to make our focus be about connecting with our child and less about creating the perfect day or the perfect outing or the perfect family vacation. Focus more so on the connection. So I like this little quote. It says, if you had a special connection with an adult when you were a child, what was it about that relationship that made you feel special? What was it? And I'll give you a moment to just kind of think about this. What was it about that relationship that made you feel special? When I think about this, my grandfather, of course, always comes to mind. This is my dad's father. I loved him, loved him, loved him. He died when I was 11. You would have thought I had 20 years with him the way I remember him. But because of the connection that I built with him and that he built with me and his intentionality, I felt seen and heard and loved and wanted, and I would pal around with him. So, like, what was it about that relationship that made it special? It was special because he was present. And I know that as parents, sometimes we're so distracted by to-dos and got to cook dinner, got to clean something, got to wash something, got to, all of that. But I remember the most that he was present, that he would listen. And I was little, so I would pal around with him. If he was going to the store, I was going to the store. And they lived in the country and they had pigs and goats and chickens and all of that stuff. So if he was out there feeding the pigs, I was out there feeding the pigs. And he never acted like, please go away, little person. He was always like, come on, and he would show me things or I would just watch. But because he was present, that's what made that relationship special to me. And so I hope that you had some time to think through, like an adult in your life when you were a child that, made you feel special and seen. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about that whole connection thing. What impacts your ability to connect with your child? Just want to go through this fairly quickly. There's a variety of things that can impact our ability to connect with our child. And this is just something for you to think about and ponder, and then think about how can you address this. How can you make some adjustments if you need to make adjustments? If you identify some things that's working really well, how can you continue that? So first of all, something that might impact your ability to connect with your child is time in your schedule. Just time. What's on your schedule? Like, how is your schedule? And I'm not just talking work, I mean life. On the weekend, after work, in the mornings. Like, how can you connect with your child? Like, do you drive your child to school? Do you drive them to the bus stop? What's going on in those times? Are you playing the radio? Are you singing a song together? Are you asking about one goal they have for the day? I don't know. There are all kinds of things. Are you taking walks after dinner together? Um, just just something to think about. And then personality. We all have our various personalities, and depending on yours and your children or your child's personality, there may be a natural kind of lean in, or there may be like, I have to work a little harder with this one's personality. But just think about that. How does that impact your connection? If you have multiple children, if one child is a little more outgoing and you're a little more outgoing, and you have the one that's kind of really quiet and reserved and reflective, do you find yourself a little more drawn to the outgoing child than so how do you work on that and make sure there's some equity there? And just meeting that child where they are. If they don't want you in their face all the time, that's cool. Like, what can you do with them? Like, what does connect with them? Is it sitting quietly at the table coloring? I mean, it's just figuring out, for your child what works. And then the mental and emotional health. How's your health mentally? And how is your health emotionally? And how does that impact your connection with your child? And same with them. What's their health emotionally, mentally? How does that impact your connection with you? And then your desire. Do you have a desire to connect with them? Just a thought. And then cultural and family influences. That's one of those where maybe if you came from a family that interacted a certain kind of way, that could be impacting your ability to connect or how you connect with your child simply because you may be trying to connect the way you connected growing up with your family, and that doesn't work for your child. Your child's like, no thanks. And so that's just something to think about. And this little quote says, the parent-child connection is the most powerful mental health intervention known to mankind. Parent-child connection is a very powerful when it comes to your child's mental health. All right. Let's talk a little bit about these parenting styles. There's four main styles. One is authoritarian, and this is the one that's more like, do what I tell you to do. They're not as open to being flexible. They tend to be known as strict parents. They tend to like to maintain control, and it's super important for them that their child is obedient and, does what they say without question oftentimes. And, you can just think, am I that parent? And then there's that permissive parent that, kids will be kids and the child is kind of running wild a bit. And sometimes they lack rules or boundaries that are clear or boundaries that stick. The boundaries might change a lot, and sometimes they're considered indulgent parents, just kind of does let the child do whatever they want to do. Maybe they don't say no a lot. And so that's something to think, that permissive parent. Then the uninvolved parent, that's the parent that may be considered neglectful. And it could be considered neglectful because they're just doing a lot of their own things. They may not be as emotionally involved in the child. And so they may be wrapped up in their own things that they have going on. They may not pay as much attention to the child. And so they're considered uninvolved. And you can be uninvolved and be in the house. It's not like even saying, I'm working a lot. You could be in the house and just disengaged. So that's something to think about. Then there's the authoritative. And that's the parent that tends to be more nurturing and they value structure, they have boundaries, they tend to keep them, but they're more open to flexing and changing them as needed. So here's a moment opportunity for you to reflect. So you can reflect and think about these questions. What comes to mind when you hear parenting is imperfect? What is your primary parenting style? And do you ever utilize other parenting styles and when? So these are some reflection questions that I want you to kind of ponder for a little bit. All right, so thank you for taking some time to reflect on these questions. Let's continue on. Again, a quick recap, a little bit of what we talked about in part one, cultivating wholeheartedness. We cannot give our children what we don't have. Think this is just so important because as parents, we're always, we want our child to oftentimes have it better than we had, or at least as good as we had, depending on what background we come from. But if we don't already have like that emotional intelligence, or if we don't already have the good emotional or mental health going on, whatever reason, you maybe you're dealing with a lot of anxiety or stress, or maybe you didn't see really good examples of parenting growing up or that kind of thing, and so you're trying your best to do what you can. And so this next statement just reminds us how we raise our children and how we think about our families and our own lives impacts our parenting. So again, back to that example of if you saw something and how you saw your family, how you were raised, and you're like, I love that, or I don't love it, that's going to impact how you parent your children. You're like, I'm never going to do that to my child, or I love that we had this particular rule, or we'd always take a vacation, or we'd always, whatever it is, that's going to impact your parenting when you become a parent. And oftentimes is you don't even plan it. I was listening to the radio recently and they were having a conversation about what's something you've said that made you realize, oh, yeah, I'm a parent. And they gave some examples and they said things like, if I have to, like one guy said, do you live in a barn or something? It's kind of like the messy house kind of situation. And and they had all kinds of little sayings that they were saying. And they said as soon as it came out their mouth, they were like, oh gosh. So I'm sure you have things like that too, where you either said something or done something. But just know that you can do it, and I'm rooting for you. The next point just says a big step in cultivating wholeheartedness in a family is to create a safe space at home. Let them know that you're already like battling the world when you leave the home. Like, I accept you the way you are. Doesn't mean you don't have rules and expectations, but they know that they're safe and they're loved at home. And then you can be imperfect and vulnerable and safe here. You can, have a bad day here and we still love you. And there's no need to kind of have that game face like you do in the world. And just basically, your ultimate message is you're always enough. And wrapping up this particular category here, just talking about cultivating worthiness in the family, the knowledge that we each always are worthy of love and belonging. And here's a few points to consider with that. Vulnerability is one of the true keys to true connection. And if we think about relationships that we have, oftentimes we feel so close to people that have been vulnerable with us, or we feel like we can build a relationship more easily or in general with a person that is vulnerable. And it could be something as simple as, oh gosh, this day is terrible, or, I can't seem to get this together, or whatever. You tend to connect more when people open up. That's pretty much what that's reminding us of, the importance of opening up. And then engaging in creativity and play as a family, doing some fun things, going playing games, going for walks, going to the park, whatever is creative and fun for you and your family, just kind of that helps you kind of cultivate the family and to make you all feel like we are a family. We do things together and we have these shared experiences. Like, even if it's just going for a walk or going to the park, or those are shared experiences. And usually when you get to do that, you bond, as a family. We played the game, we had game night or whatever. And then practicing gratitude and joy in the home, appreciating people, thanking your child for cleaning their room. Sometimes you may feel odd for saying, "Thank you for putting your shoes neatly together by the door." If you take off your shoes when you enter the home, or whatever, just things that sometimes you as a parent may go, "Of course they're supposed to do that." But just thanking them just the same. And remember, we talked about, you praise what you want to see. So think of it that way, instead of, why should I thank them for doing what they're supposed to do? They're supposed to put their dish in the sink and rinse it, or put in dishwasher if that's something. But thank them for doing it anyway, because you're praising what you want to see more of. And then respect and hard work in a culture of fun, fast, and easy. And then it's actually our ability to embrace, this is cultivating worthiness in the family still, our ability to embrace imperfection that will help us teach our children to have the courage to be authentic. And I don't know about you, but I love authentic people, flawed people, real people. Because again, back to you feel like you can bond, you can connect with them when they're not, you don't feel like they're put together and so perfect. And it doesn't have to be any super tragic thing, but just human. Like, I feel like you're human. Okay, I can relate to you. Something as simple as you be like, gosh, I keep going to the store and I keep forgetting to buy whatever. Or I need to clean up my fridge. I've been saying it for 3 weeks. Like, simple things sometimes can help you to see, oh, okay, this person's being authentic. Like, you can connect with them. The compassion to love themselves and others, a sense of connection that gives true purpose and meaning to life. I should not have stopped in the middle of that quote, by the way, but that's a quote. All right, perfectionism. Literally, this is all I have on this one. Is anybody perfect? I mean, the whole book is talking about nobody's perfect. So I didn't feel it was need to have a whole slide with comments and all of that. Basically, perfectionism is, kind of the pressure we put on ourselves to do everything right all the time. And note, it's the pressure that we put on ourselves. Oftentimes, nobody is expecting you to be perfect. Now, there may be some people that's like, why did you make a mistake? That's not 100% foolproof, but oftentimes when it comes to being a perfectionist, we're talking about a person that puts the pressure on themselves to be like perfect in all aspects of their life, in their home life, in their work life, with their children, if they have a partner, with their partner, with their finances. in social settings, with their money, you name it. So nobody's perfect. So here's some additional reflection questions. What do you do to cultivate worthiness in your child? How do you respond to yourself when you make a mistake? Oops. And how do you assure your children that they do not need to be perfect? These are kind of big questions. I want you to think about that for a moment. All right, so looking at this little quote here, it says, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to be bed it's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. Love that. Just as reminding and encouraging us to just acknowledge that, yes, I'm imperfect. Yes, I make mistakes. I'm vulnerable. But you know what? I'm also some other things. I'm brave. I'm worthy. I'm worthy of love and belonging. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about love and belonging. So, love and belonging is a birthright. It is not on the table when I am in struggle. Like it's not like can be taken away from us because I made a mistake. So that's something we want to make sure we're not sending that message to our children. And oftentimes you're not even saying that, but in how we respond to them or what we say or our nonverbals, sometimes can make them wonder, like, do you love me? And I don't know if you've ever had a child say, do you still love me? It's almost heartbreaking when you hear something like that from your child, but all you do is reassure them, of course, absolutely. There's nothing you can ever do to make me not love you. But sometimes that's just where they are. They're in that vulnerable space and they are wondering, do you still love me? Or if you have a child that doesn't say things a lot and you know that about them, because the extroverted child is probably the one that's more likely to say that, and the introverted is more likely to think it. So I encourage you as parents to just be aware, thinking about your child's personality, like we talked about earlier, that can impact your connection. Be like, okay, I know this child is probably thinking that and not saying certain things, so I'm just going to say it for them. And they might burst into tears, when you say it, and or they may be like, "Oh, I'm glad," or they may, and you be like, "Oh my gosh, you were thinking that." So this is just a reminder that there's some things that we can do to encourage our children and make sure they know that they are always loved and they always belong. So, what do we need most from families is love and belonging. Because when we go out into the world, your child is facing all kinds of things at school, on the playground, in activities. And they need to be able to come home and be like, no matter what, I know I'm wanted at home. I know I'm loved at home. I know I belong in this family. So, love, here's a few things about something to think about that. We cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be powerful selves to be seen and known. Love is not something we give or get, love is something we nurture and grow. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves. So if you think about that, that makes me think when somebody's kind of grouchy or in a bad mood a lot, it makes me wonder how much they love themselves. Because you may be a little annoyed by the fact that they're tending to not be in the best mood a lot. But then you may have to pause and say it's hard for them to give what they don't have, like we talked about earlier. We're expecting them to be nice and kind and all of that. They just don't have it to give. So it makes you see things a little differently. And then the whole belonging part. It's an innate human desire to be a part of something that is larger than us. We often try to acquire this by fitting in and seeking approval. Like we all want to fit in. Like if you're at work, you want to fit in at work. You want to get the good job when you do something well at work. Your children want that also from you at home. And this is a hollow sense of belonging and often barriers to belonging. True belonging often happens when we present our authentic and imperfect selves to the world. That's true belonging. And so basically, that's just reminding us like, be who you are, be authentic. And that when people accept you, you want them to accept you because of the real you and not the fake you, not who they think you are. So true belonging is like, be authentic, be imperfect, and let people accept you from that space. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So again, back to the if you don't like yourself or haven't accepted your flaws and your great things, we all have them both. That could be something to ponder or get some help with that. So fitting in is a primary barrier to belonging. It shows up, we're encouraging ourselves to show up, to be real, to be authentic, and let ourselves be seen. And this little quote here says, "You're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging." So here's a few more things to consider when it comes to love and belonging. We raise our children with courage, compassion, and hope. They become adults who can move through this world with a sense of courage and resilience. That's just something we aim for. So parents need to draw a line, and here's the line you're drawing. In this household, we will not use our vulnerability against one another. It's helpful to set some family ground rules. And so this is just, in your family when people, if you have a child that's picking on another child, because of some shortcoming that they have, you're going to let them know, no, no, we don't do that. Like, we understand that this person, let's just say, can't tie their shoes yet, but we're not going to pick on them and be like, you can't tie your shoes. We're not going to do that. That's not what we do in this household. So it's just, reminds us because we want them to feel loved and that they belong. And we're not going to pick on them because of some type of vulnerability or some type of shortcoming or something, some skill or something they haven't acquired or personality that's different from ours, any of that. It's important to be mindful about the relationship that exists between siblings. I love this point here. They know what hurts one another. And if you have more than one child, you get this. Or if you are one of more than one child growing up, you get this. They see the struggles, they see the challenges. They have like a front row seat basically to your good days and your bad days sometimes. And they can poke you, in the spaces where it hurts. So that's where we set those ground rules as a family and we lead by example, as parents. So they are witnesses to our best and worst moments. They have ammo that can be used to hurt us in very powerful ways. And so we want to just set some rules and be mindful of that. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self acceptance. Just mention that. This little quote says, "Are you the adult you want your child to become? Are you the adult you want your child to become?" There's lots of ways to think about that. And I don't know what's the first thing that comes to your mind, but I do encourage you to ponder that a little bit. Am I? Am I the adult that has self-compassion? And I want my child to have self-compassion. Am I the adult that's authentic and that's caring and kind, patient? So just something to think about. And let's think about hopelessness. This is another guidepost from the book. Parenting is a practical and hopeful program for raising, I love the word program here, for raising children who know that they are worthy of love, belonging, and joy. A way of thinking about ourselves in the world, that's hopefulness. Hopefulness is about the ability to set goals, to find innovation and creative ways of getting there, and the abilities that we can do it, like agency. So in hopefulness, we set goals when we're hopeful. We create plans when we're hopeful. So there's something to think about. Sometimes if a child is feeling hopeless, they have no motivation. As adults, when we're feeling hopeless, our motivation could be low or almost non-existent. So hopefulness is very important when it comes to parenting. Helping your child to be hopeful and being hopeful yourself. And because you're hopeful, you're oftentimes able to set some goals for your child or your family. You're able to see a path forward and you're creating paths forward. So hope is about the ability to plan B something. I love that idea. The ability to come up with alternative routes when things don't go our way. And we're teaching our children by example with this as well. When things don't go right, in the home, it could be a trip you're planning and the flights got canceled if you were flying, or now you have to get a couple of new tires or whatever. Now we have to leave tomorrow instead of today. Uh, you know, how are you it's being an example of hope and creating that plan B and moving forward and not stopping and getting completely stuck because plan A didn't work out? So that hopefulness part of you is like, oh, okay, well, just pivot. Let's reset. Let's move forward. So this quote says, a strong relationship with a parent can provide children with a sense of security and belonging, helping them to feel supported as they navigate the obstacles of growing up. A strong relationship with a parent. That's what we're going for. Not perfect, just strong. So here's another couple of questions to ponder. How vulnerable are you with your children? How do you show up? How do you show them they belong to your family no matter what they do? And then what can you do to maintain hopefulness on your parenting journey? And that part is for you. As a parent, like what can you do to make sure you stay hopeful? Okay. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to remind us that we're talking about progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection. And then here's a parenting thought for you. It's important to reflect on how you were parented, but not from a place of let's shame our parents or shaming us. Instead, let's look for a way we can move forward, move our families forward. So we're just saying, look, it's good to reflect, it's good to consider, and then at the end of the day, make some decisions that make sense for your family. And then what habits can you start today to improve and support your parenting progress? Like what habits can you start today? It could be something with the connection piece, like, taking a walk after dinner or going for a walk on a Saturday or playing a board game. Like if connection is something that you want to do, improve, just think about what can you do? And then, or bedtime story, maybe you used to do that and you don't do it anymore. Or, maybe there's like a question at the family that everybody's talking to, or eating together as a family. Maybe everyone's running in different directions and you hardly ever do that anymore. There's all kinds of things to think about with this one. What do you need to stop doing or refine or, regroup on? And how can being vulnerable improve your relationship with your child? Like right now, has your child ever say, you think you're perfect, or I'm not perfect, or anything like that? So, maybe tell them some stories where you made some mistakes, just, or how you're working on some aspect of your, being more patient or whatever. What resources can help you on your imperfect parenting journey? Like, what resources? Is it helpful to connect with other parents and small groups? Is it helpful to go for walks and talks about parenting? Is it helpful just to reflect yourself? Like, what resources? Are there books you want to read? Whatever. Think about it. So this just reminds you that, if you were to go to our website, our Work Life and Wellbeing website, there's lots of great resources there. We do have our Working Parents Network that you can join. And with our Working Parents Network, that's where we promote upcoming events and activities. And we have a speed friending event this Friday. So if you do want to connect with other parents, that's just a fun kind of like take a break, connect with other parents, talk. So that's coming up. We have Parent Circle coming up, another fatherhood journey workshop coming up, and then a brown bag in May. So we always have these Tuesday workshops on the second Tuesday of the month. This month was different. We had lots of workshops this month, but normally we just have that second Tuesday workshop, and then we have that third Wednesday real talks. That's like an informal support group. You just come as you are and ask whatever questions are on your mind at that time. to other parents and they give you feedback. And then we have lots of other ongoing services to support you on your parenting journey. And at any time, if you needed a consultation about something parenting related, I'm always available to do those with you. If you're trying to find resources, if you're part of our parenting group on Facebook or Teams and you have a question that you'd like to post for other parents to reply to or give you suggestions or advice or resources, you're welcome to do that and give parents an opportunity to support you. So, thank you so much for being here for this second part of this Parenting is Imperfect workshop series. Hopefully, you learned a lot and was able to reflect and just consider where you are on your parenting journey and know that you are doing the best with where you are and to keep going.